Hello, everyone. It is Friday, March 22nd. This is Kubernetes sig-aws, our bi-weekly meeting. I am your moderator, facilitator, Justin Santa Barbara. I work at Google. We have a fairly light agenda for the day. We have a demo from Alex and Alex Denton and a discussion of the sig-aws, or the AWS encryption provider. If you do have other things you would like to discuss, please do add them onto the agenda so we can get to them. Otherwise, I propose we go straight into the agenda, into the demo. Alex, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sounds great. Can you hear me?
We can.
Good stuff. Yeah, so thanks for having me. I'm excited to demonstrate a pretty simple controller that my team put together around provisioning EKS clusters across accounts in AWS. We had a specific problem that because we're leveraging EKS, and EKS has certain APIs disabled, namely the alpha APIs and all that, we couldn't play with super cool things like the cluster API and Federation v2 and all that kind of stuff. So we had to, or we decided that we would build sort of a pseudo federation controller, and then we would eventually loop back in with the special interest groups when it came to what the community's going towards for federation and all that. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen if I can. Right. I'm just going to share the whole thing here. All right. Are you able to see my screen here?
We are. We have the we have the Amazon API. We have yes. We have your web browser up right now.
Okay. Cool. Good stuff. Okay, so I just brought the project here so you can see where it lives in GitHub. It is open source and you can use it today. I don't know if I would suggest using it in any production environment right now, although we are. But we are actively developing it currently. So if you see any, we have a bunch of issues and stuff in there. I was going to take this opportunity as well to plug our VPN controller as well as our API gateway controller as well. But I won't distract you too much with those two things right now. So anyways, so that's where it lives. And I'll just as a side, I know that there are other projects like Gardener and the Cluster API provider for AWS, as well as the Federation v2, but this is not trying to solve those problems. This is really just a purpose-built controller for our own stuff. So let me see here. I've got a, there it is. So I actually put together a video of this working. Basically what we've done is we've modeled basically an EKS cluster and node groups as custom resources. We've also done a little bit of federation work with some core APIs inside of Kubernetes, so deployments, resources as deployment services, config maps, just stuff that we needed to be able to actually deploy as federated resources across however many clusters we were provisioning. And that's, again, sort of just stopgap until federation becomes more stable inside Kubernetes. So here we go. So the first thing I'm displaying here, actually that's started a little early. So the first thing here is the custom resource, which models an EKS cluster. You'll see the account ID that we want to provision a new cluster in, the region that we want to deploy it to, the cross-account role name. So this is actually an IAM role in the child account that the controller will then assume. We're actually using kube.iam under the hood right now for that stuff. But once EKS actually moves to something else, we'll probably adopt that. The control plane, these are the configuration details for the control plane. So right now you can specify things like the VPC CIDR block, the subnet CIDRs, and then the cluster name, which will end up showing up in your console or CLI if you're to list clusters. And then the node groups. So each of this is a list of which it ends up being their own custom resources. So we've modeled node groups as well. And so you can do there's certain configuration here. Again, this was sort of like on as we needed basis. We built this stuff in, so being able to specify IAM policies for your worker groups and being able to name them as well. I'm just going to quickly show the deployment and the, let the video just run here real quick. It's like using ScreenFlow and just like I was like, I wonder how much I'm going to be talking while I'm doing this. So, all right, so this is actually the deployment resource, which is basically just a vanilla deployment that's wrapped in our own custom resource, which we can specify the cluster we want to deploy it to, the name that it eventually gets in the child cluster and all that. And then the last one here is the service. Here, I'll just go ahead, fast forward here a little bit. This is the service, same exact thing. So we just basically wrapped the vanilla service resource type in Kubernetes with our own custom resource, and then the controller goes and makes that all happen. So here I just show that I'm going to, so I actually show the stateful set that's running the controller. We're using the Kube Builder framework for building this stuff. If you're familiar with that, it's a pretty cool project. Makes writing controllers fairly straightforward, and it just shows me. I show that I have the CRD applied to the cluster or my federated control plane, and then I apply those resources. And then basically what I do is I show that it's the cluster is now applied, and I get the resource, and I show here at the bottom status is creating control plane. And I do some fancy JQ stuff. Here we go. So standing up an EKS cluster, as I'm sure you guys are aware of, or if you've done it yourself, takes a little while. It takes roughly 15 minutes or so. So what this does is actually uses CloudFormation under the hood, but it spins up an entirely new VPC. It sets up all your networking. It deploys the EKS cluster, and then it actually goes through each of those node groups, and the node groups are in themselves CloudFormation stacks. So I'll just sort of fast forward here. So it gives you that status. So the first status was creating control plane, then it's creating node groups. When it's complete, I actually do a little bit of IAM magic here. I'm assuming the role that created that cluster, created the cluster, and then I'm assuming the role of the child account. It's all actually in the same account right now, but don't worry about that stuff. Hopefully our README is straightforward enough that you can figure it out if you end up playing with this yourself. I then update, I basically grab a kube config, and then I watch all the resources just to show that stuff actually stood up. So if we do this, it just shows me applying all that stuff. And then if I scroll forward a bit, here we go. So that shows the, and I realized after I made this video, I was like, it's really kind of hard to tell that this is actually like a second EKS cluster, but you can try. I don't want to take up too much time, so I've already talked a lot. So I'd be happy to discuss more of this stuff in Slack if you guys have questions after today. But yeah, so this shows that all that's up and running. I actually grabbed the host name here, and I just pop it in my browser to show you that Nginx is running. It's a pretty pretty standard demo, I think. And then I show at the end here, I actually delete all the EKS clusters that are in the parent control plane. And there is a finalizer attached to this, so it actually waits until all the stacks are cleaned up. And you'll see over on the right-hand side, we have deleting control plane. And so it'll stay in that status until all the stacks have been removed, which includes the VPC and the networking and all that. And then once that's complete, it will, well, it actually like timed out there, but then it will show that it's deleted, and you'll see on the right-hand side, it can't find anything, so it's all done. So that's pretty much it. I think the one takeaway from here is that we are really just using this as like an EKS cluster provisioning tool for now. We have some federated resources, but we intentionally separate those out into their own controllers because we eventually want to loop back into what the community is actually doing for provisioning and federation and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's it. I'm sure that was a whirlwind demo. Are there any questions?
That was a great demo. I definitely have a couple of questions. I want to give other people time if there are people that have them. I'm trying to go into the right view so I can see everybody. Sure. Maybe I'll kick us off with one, and then hopefully someone else will jump in. So we were creating on our first, when we were first doing it, we were on an EKS cluster, and then we created another cluster, but we did have an EKS cluster to start with. That was a little, I didn't know where we were running it first.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I should have explained that. So we have a parent cluster that's running, And then each of those resources, so if you apply, whatever, you apply however many custom resources as EKS resources, those then go out and are the child clusters.
Very cool. And then, and you have as well some federation of deployments and services so that I can deploy a single app across multiple clusters, and then there's a load balancer that will load balance across the clusters.
So right now we are just provisioning and deploying those services to the child clusters. There is no like single entry point that is load balancing across them. It's really just to limit blast radius for deployed applications, whatever it is. So the Federation V2 effort and other Federation efforts are much more like how do we balance workloads across multiple clusters. Ours is really just like how do we deploy applications from a central location out to n number of service accounts.
Got it. Still very cool and makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know if there are
there's some things about this that are interesting to me. I mean, requiring a cluster to build the other clusters might be a deal breaker there, but if I want to follow up and ask some questions about this offline, you're Alex Hansen in the Kube Slack, right?
Yep.
Okay, I'll ping you there if I have questions.
Great, thanks.
If there are no other questions, then thank you so much, Alex. And do feel free to put links into the things you showed. Particularly the ones you flew by in the beginning. I think there's a VPC thing, and put those in the or feel free to put those in the agenda so that people can come and refer to them.
Great, thanks so much.
Awesome, thank you. All right, well, if there are no other questions for Alex, then we should move on to the next item on our agenda. The next item is Dan Sexton and Seth Pollock, a discussion about testing and releasing of the AWS encryption provider. I feel like this is going to be me apologizing a lot, but please go ahead.
Hey, yeah. So Dan reached out to me about like just how to, start using the AWS encryption provider, and offered to help get like a testing and a release process in place. So we just wanted to bring it up here and see, the best way to move forward with it.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, I have to apologize because I think, Seth, you sent a PR to COPS, which is going to be one way to get it under testing, but we haven't had the chance to get that into COPS yet. So I apologize for that. There is good news. There is a working group, Kate's Infra, which is spinning up repos so that there will be a nice official place to push your images. There will also be a way to that's sort of the infrastructure side. That's not quite ready yet, but I think at the moment it's fairly easy to get a staging repo, and the thing that is coming soon is the ability to promote the images that you bless. So like a release, for example. So that sort of distribution of images will be better. The how to do testing remains hard, particularly for things that interact with AWS resources. I will endeavor to circle back to your PR, Seth. I apologize again. And we can try to get that into COPS. I don't know if there are other tools that we could try to integrate it with in terms of E2E type testing, if that's what you're looking for.
So I think he's specifically tried to get it working with KubeADM.
Okay.
So I think if we can just get some kind of process where we can start tagging and posting release binaries. I figured out, basically mounting the socket, if I'm able to run it at the system level into the API server, I can use it. It's just getting everything stood up so we can cut and post release binaries similar to some of the other projects.
Okay. Yes. So that. There is a process for that now. It should be easier. It should be very easy to get a staging bucket, which will be a good first step. And then I think the ETA. I think there was supposed to be a demo of the promoter this week in the working group Kate's Infra. I think people weren't able to attend in general that meeting, so I think we punted it for another 2 weeks. But then I think there will be a process for promoting images out of your staging bucket into production buckets. So I can certainly take an action item to go and get one of those staging buckets set up for the project, which is the first step. And then we would also need to create a proud job or any means you want, but a proud job is the easiest to publish sort of continuous builds into that staging bucket. I don't know how that sounds. Yeah.
So is the plan to both deliver binaries that can run on the system level and Docker images?
Is the AWS encryption provider a binary or primarily a binary, or is it primarily an image?
My understanding is the API server reads and writes from a socket, and the encryption provider is what is using whatever mechanic to encrypt the data before it's written to etcd.
So you can either, I guess you got, yeah, I was imagining running it as a sidecar pod. Seth, how did you do it? But I guess you could also run it as a binary. Seth, do you remember how you did it in the?
Yeah. So the way Google does it and the way it was bootstrapped in the COPS PR is as a sidecar container. In the same pod as the API server, and then they just share the volume out with the socket.
So I guess just having a path from the kubeadm perspective of how to get that sidecar integrated into the manifest that kubeadm is generating.
Yes, that I cannot speak to. That we probably need to talk to kubeadm folk about. They do have a Slack channel, and they are very good at issue triage. So I would definitely recommend opening an issue and seeing what they recommend. If it turns out that they do recommend not running a sidecar container, and they do recommend doing a binary, there is also a parallel effort in the same working group, Kate's Infra, to produce buckets for storage of non-image artifacts. And that is probably about 2 weeks behind the other effort, 2 to 4 weeks behind the other effort. So similar sort of process. There will be a staging bucket, and there will be a promoter process. So I think the right course of action would be, we'll definitely start the process of getting the staging buckets for the images, which feels like the more natural path or the more obvious path. If kubeadm, and if you don't mind, Dan, if you reach out to kubeadm on a GitHub issue or on Slack and see whether they would recommend us have a mechanism for a sidecar pod or whether they would much prefer a binary. If they do prefer a binary, we can start that bucket rolling as well, I guess.
I figure both paths, just in case there's another group that wants to run on the system level. Why not just have both?
Yeah, it's always a challenge, right? For just just for support reasons, right? Like if we're not going to test both paths, like but yes, it's you're right. We can always do both. I think that's a good idea. We'll certainly provision the. Well, I will follow up on provisioning a bucket and a image repo, and I don't imagine anyone would give too much pushback on that.
And I can follow up with kubeadm folks about best paths to integrate that either in a pod or whether we fall back to a system level execution of it.
Okay, cool. If you open a GitHub issue or on Slack, if you tag me, that would be great. I'm Justin SB on both.
Okay.
Then I'll see it. Thank you. Yeah, it would be great to get that up and running. And then we don't have anything else on the agenda, it looks like. I don't know if anyone else has anything they would like to discuss. Otherwise, we will call our meeting to an end. But any call for any items? Going once, going twice. All right. Thank you all. I wish you all a very happy Friday and a wonderful weekend. And thank you all for participating, and see you in 2 weeks. And thank you, Alex, for the demo. That was awesome.